We have one more presenter. That would be...
Two more.
Oh, no, one more. Jeff Stansfield.
Okay.
Jeff Stansfield is founder of Advantage Video. Jeff, whenever you're ready.
Whenever I'm ready. Okay. Thank you very much. I don't have a lot of slides. I don't like slides because when you're looking at a slide, you're not looking at me. So, no, I'm also dyslexic and I can't spell. So if I have slides, then you're going to get there's going to be a lot of misspellings, and I'll look foolish, less than I look foolish now. So we've heard a lot from my fellow speakers. On Spark drives, on workflows. Robert talked about some of the great things that Avid's doing and stuff like that, and there's some doing incredible stuff. Avid's new cloud-based editorial and cloud-based asset management systems is going, and we're changing the entire way that we're looking at storage architecture. Jonathan talked about, that we're technologists and we're in a creative space, and I thought that was really well put, and really dividing and bringing the proper governance and taxonomy to our workflows, and I thought that was really good, and then we're gonna and then we have Racktop with some really good storage for security, and this is a lot of really cool things. But when I get asked a lot, I get a lot of things, and I'm thinking always about what I should talk about. And one of the things that I get asked a lot is connections. This gentleman, I don't know if you've ever, this is an old TV show called Connections. That guy, he goes from way back, from bubbling oils in the Sahdoon Desert to cars and rocket ships and stuff like that. But what I get asked is, what's the difference between 10 gigi, 40 gigi, 100 gigi, fiber? What does all this do? What's the best workflow? Why should I invest thousands and thousands of dollars into going with fiber, and when I can go 10 gigi? And I kind of wanted to maybe talk about that a little bit and maybe give you guys an idea of what the different technologies mean in that. And if I can figure out technology, I'll move forward. So we have gigi, which is 10 gigi, 25 gigi, 40 gigi, 100 gigi. Fiber channel goes from 16. We're past 8. There's still some 8 infrastructures out there that are 8, but we're moving into 16 and 32 and 128 gig fiber. And so what does this mean? What's the difference in this? There's also SAS and Thunderbolt. So at our booth right now, we're demoing the M-Logic Thunderbolt Ray, which is actually a Thunderbolt and SAN system. And so there's different technologies, and how do they work for you? Well, Thunderbolt is really good for smaller networks. If you're a small post-production company or on-set system and you need very few editors and stuff like that, that's perfect because it's low cost, very easy to plug in. You just plug in the Thunderbolt computers and you can rock and roll. So the protocols for 10 gigi, 10 gigi goes about 64 to 66 encoding. You get about 1,250 megabytes access time, and your bandwidth is about 10.31125. With fiber channel, so the biggest difference between gigi technology and fiber technology is headroom. So with gigabit networking, you're talking about a layer of metadata that goes on top of your Ethernet cable. So there's a lot of other room in there. Now there's some people who are doing some things that remove that headroom out and are breaking away from the SMB, AFP metadata that's on top of that cable and breaking it out. But for the most part, you have all this metadata on top of your cable, and that's causing fluctuations in your data. So if you're an editor, if you're a VFX artist and you're sending a single cell to the render farm or to a server, you don't need a huge high bandwidth. If you're an editor, an audio editor, audio takes very little bandwidth. So if you're using audio, doing audio editing, you don't need that much bandwidth. You can do 1 gig or 10 gig you don't need a huge amount of bandwidth. But if you're an editor and you're doing higher end editing, or if you're a colorist and you're doing finishing, then you need super high fast speeds, and you can run up against some really high end headroom. So, so you have to manage about where that platform is and what you're editing. An analogy that I use is if you ever watch the Shrek movie, the first Shrek movie, and there's this, Shrek is going up to the castle, and there's this big winding road going all the way up to the castle. And the little knight goes on the path, and he runs along the path, and he goes along that, and he follows this direct path to get to the castle. And then Shrek just heads straight up through the path and goes straight up into the castle and gets there much faster. And that's fiber channel. Fiber channel is your technology goes right to where it needs to go and takes a big, bulky, giant run for it and gets to your data, and your data gets back faster. So it's a way of creating. My clock didn't go, so I don't know.
That's fine. You're good.
Okay,
You're
so it's a way of understanding bandwidth and headroom. So we're coming up right now. We're coming up in 40 gig. 40 gig is, and actually a lot of companies are skipping 40 gig, and we're going to 100 gig. 100 gig is out, and it's there. The only problem with 40 gig is that some of the driver issues have been holding up, and so so the drivers are not there yet. But there's a lot of companies like Simply and Quantum and companies that are going right to the 100 gig bandwidth. 100 gig will get you a really good bandwidth, but there's still that headroom problem. So if you're sending, you're doing footage and you're doing 4K footage, and you want to do 2 streams of 4K footage, and you're at 40 gig, and you think 40 gig, that's 40 gig. It's actually not 40 gig. It's actually, so 40 gig is 5,000 megabytes a second, but if you're doing 2 streams of 4K, you're about max on that. That's where you're about at, and you never want to be about max. You really want to have about a 30%. The actual measurement is about 20 to 30% headroom, because you have a lot of fluctuations in gigabit networking. In Ethernet networking, you have about you have a lot of metadata there, and you have a lot of headroom. You need to budget about 20 to 30%. We tell our clients, hey, give us 30% headroom, because that's what you really need to do. So if you have 2 streams of 4K uncompressed UHD, 60p footage, you're not, even 40 gig is not going to be enough. But 16 gig fiber is going to be enough. So how does 16 gig be better than the 40 gig? Well, because you have no metadata headroom on there. Metadata is taken through another pipeline, and you have a direct connection. And most people can run dual streams of your fiber channel, so you can get 16 both ways, so you're actually getting twice that. So it comes out to be much, much faster with fiber channel. But fiber channel is more expensive. You have to buy fiber channel cards and fiber channel switches and all that stuff. Some storages like Simply and Quantum out here do have direct connections into their systems, and you can go that, but it's much easier and much more powerful to go through the proper way and buy an Addo card, but they're more expensive. So it's a different way of doing that technology. Couple more minutes. Okay. So, so this is basically what I wanted to talk about. Was that? Let's see. My next slide. Oh, my next slide. Okay, that was 2 slides. So I told you I didn't have very many slides. So. So basically, in going around this, is that I wanted to look at you to manage manage and think about your workflows. Think about what you're doing. Think about the topology of the bandwidth you're doing for your projects. You know, everyone is talking about scale-out NAS, and it's a very popular thing, and people are saying, why should I keep investing in fiber channel? And I say that there is a lot of space and there's a lot of room for fiber channel. Fiber channel is still a relative and important network topology. And to just abandon it because we have all these scale-out NAS systems is kind of abandoning something that is a solid, secure way of transferring your data. And like our speakers have said, you know, our data is important to us. And if you lose your data, you know, Jonathan said, if you lose your data, you know, you're out of business. You know, I mean, that's your movie you spend so much time on. You're gonna get fired, and then what are you gonna do? Then you're not gonna be able to buy from me, and so that's it. So I'll finish up by telling you who I am, because I wanted to start with that, but I didn't. So I'm Jeff Stansfield from Advantage Video Systems. We're an integration company. We sell and build technology systems. We're one of the largest builders of video podcasting studios, and we've built over 250 TV stations in our 18 years now of business, well, 18 in November. And we have some great clients like Patrick Yao and Larry Jordan, who's going to come up next, and stuff like that. So we hope you'll join us. And if you have any more questions on network topology, or if this was very confusing, you can contact me.
We're also going to have a chance for some Q&A.
And we're going to have some ones, so you can contact me on the board or after the meeting. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Jeff. All right. So now we are going to move into the panel discussion part, and we are adding a panelist. Jeff noticed there's somebody else sitting at the table. That's another Jonathan Halstock.
Yep.
Excuse me. I did it again, didn't I?
No, you're good.
Who's the Chief Technology Officer for Racktop Systems. So thank you so much for joining us. So since you've all been so nice and patient and writing down all of your questions, you've heard a lot of kind of in-depth presentations here. Let's start off with your Q&As. Do you have any questions for any of the presenters that we've heard thus far? This would be the time to raise your hand. Ah, there's a question there.
Jeff. Hi, Jeff.
Hi.
When do you think you might be utilizing 400 gigabit Ethernet? We have that spec released. There's other interfaces too, like InfiniBand and others, a little bit more expensive, lower latency than Ethernet. If that's important, going ahead. I didn't know if you were looking at other interfaces and which ones you thought might be more promising.
Yeah, so 400 gig Ethernet is being used. Fox and some data centers, Rackspace in Texas is implementing 400 gig Ethernet in there. So it is being actually implemented right now. The technology is there. The problem is drivers. So like 100 gig is here, and it was actually announced. Sorry, it was here, and it was announced, and it was supposed to be released already. But the drivers for 100 gig is the issue. So like most of the companies out there have 100 gig. I'm sure even Racktop has 100 gig technology ready to be built into their thing. The cards are there, the switches are there, everything is there. The problem is that the drivers, Mellanox and some of the companies have not certified the drivers yet for 100 gig E. So, but 400 gig actually is in place and implemented in some data centers and some high-end studios.
All right. Is there anybody else on the panel like to comment on this? Great.
Well, why don't you speak? You can speak on that.
Do we have another question from the audience?
I was going to say, yeah, I agree with what you said about the 100 gig and kind of adoption. Drivers kind of lag the card, so it's how fast they adopt. Just like NVMe, it was a long time for the drivers to catch up.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Any other questions?
I can think of one. Actually, I really liked your solution there for Mac operating system to auto mount or mount drives, sparse type data structures. What about disaster recovery? What are you doing for disaster recovery or any type of sync capability to like S3 or whatever? What are you thinking about in that world?
So I utilize a sparse bundle for basically organization of my projects, and recently got an LTO tape backup for some of our clients because I'm sitting in a place, I have my own now I have my own 40 terabyte Nexus. My clients has another 180 terabyte Nexus. And we basically now, and we have a 72 terabyte local storage. And what we do to back up basically the workspaces on the Nexus, we create sparse bundles on our local storage, and we organize our projects, just like I showed, in separate sparse bundles, and then those goes to the LTO, because what we found is that when you just back up the files in, let's say, folders on an LTO, you end up with too many files, especially with all the metadata little files that live next to your media files. So when we try to back up a 2 terabyte workspace from offline, it had thousands and thousands and thousands of files, which work great on the Nexus. When you put it into an LTO, it just failed. So this was another solution for us to basically organize the projects and the workspaces. You end up with 10 or 15 or 20 big sparse bundle files. Those go into the LTO, and then the client calls up and he says, oh, you know what? We need that episode 201 from 8 months ago. We bring up those 2 sparse bundles, and boom, we're in business. So hopefully that answers your question. It just kind of helped organize everything in a nicely and tight way, as if we had a kind of a Nexus online at all times. So.
Great. Does that answer your question? Well, as we move forward, please feel free to ask a question at any time. Just raise your hand and we'll send the mic over your way. So I have some questions, of course. Since we are in the media and entertainment business, obviously security is a huge factor, and there have been enough incidents over recent years to make people very nervous about security in the studios and post-production facilities. So is that need for security at odds with what creatives need and want? Is there any kind of win-win solutions?
Well, I'm sorry. So we're actually very involved in security. One of the things that, there's different levels of security you do, and one of the best ways you can do, and it actually helps the creatives do this, is distance-based KVM systems. Most companies, if they want to work with the big studios like Disney and so forth, you need to have the MPAA compliance, Motion Picture Association compliance, and that is securing your data, making sure that no one can get to your data. And distance-based KVM systems where you take all your computers, all the workstations, and put them into the server room with your Avid Nexus or your Racktop system, and so everything's there. And then on your desktops, you only have a keyboard, a mouse, and maybe a drawing tablet or DaVinci tablet. And what this does is it secures it so there's no way that people can copy data off, and the studios can be secure, and you can be secure that your data is safe. It also the ability you can walk into any editing bay. You can walk into any bay and say, I want this to be computer 12 or computer 6 or computer 3. And so it allows the creatives to actually be able to work on the system that they want to work on, and it allows them to be the company to be secure on their data.
Great, thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that. I'm sure other people have some comments as well. This is such a hot topic.
Yeah, I think there's different levels of security, maturity, and sophistication within organizations, and ideally what you want to do is be able to create an environment where the secure path is kind of the easiest path, or the path of least resistance, because typically people have an opinion that security is going to be difficult or it's going to slow things down, and so you need a solution that kind of integrates and is kind of transparent to the user. When you use things like encryption, it's not a pain in the neck to deal with the passwords or encryption key management. And because now, I definitely agree with the fact that you want to have kind of the remote desktop environments, but where you have to share data outside of the environment, you want to have a way to track and audit that too, to make sure you can see who's accessing the data and that people aren't taking the data out of the network and then it's in a place where you don't know. So part of that problem is getting your hands around the data and making it easy to follow the work process that the creatives are doing when that means sharing and collaborating.
Yeah, just to build on that a little bit, if you have, let's say you're shooting in London and then you're following the sun to get your content out, it's having physical tie to a particular device gives you a problem. So you need to be able to secure your data wherever it is. And you have to take the weakest link kind of approach to it and say that I'm going to assume that someone somewhere could do something with this. So how do I secure that data in that remote location? So that's where your encryption and having zero overhead around that is key, because otherwise you get the spinning ball of death, and then everybody will hate you and the whole thing will break down. So you have to have a layered architecture. And you know, in my world, we have a lot of freelancers. So you know, it's how do you balance up that need that, you know, you might be doing some post-production work out in, you know, Hong Kong or wherever it might be. So you need to take a holistic, wider view in it. You have to secure the data wherever it is, and then you have to make sure that it's easy to use going forward.
Yes, thanks. Bob, do you have any comments on this?
We worked with a number of companies. So like I know with Star Wars, they had used Avid Storage, and they literally had like security guards with guns staring at it. And
Yikes.
it was completely off-site. But we worked with a number of companies so that was one way of doing security, is to have people with guns. The other is we worked with a number of companies that actually do on encryption. You know, the workspaces and the files are encrypted on it, and it can decrypt on the fly. And so at rest they're encrypted, and then when you hit play they unencrypt, and it works just fine. So that's the decryption is fast enough now.
All right, and Tal, I'm sure you have some comments.
I just want to put things in perspective. When things work fast enough, it's amazing and it's great. What I find is that a lot of times you don't have unlimited resources to add another $40,000 triple firewall, or you don't have a way of, let's separate physically the input into the facility, drives arrive here, then they're going to get manually moved from here to here and resecured the internal network. Sometimes it's a much smaller operation. And there was just I looked at the results of a IT audit, and the place they were doing it completely failed. And they were looking at, oh, can somebody come in and steal the sound effect from the third act under the open of the bumper? So what I mean is that, yes, you need to secure everything, but what one would assume hackers would really want is, and what we've seen hacks that have been done, is they steal the whole show. They steal something that if you put on the internet is actually watchable. The whoosh 12 minutes into the show on track number 4 means nothing to absolutely 100% of the people. So you work on Star Wars, you work on Star Wars. Granted, hat down, that whoosh actually makes some people excited on Twitter. But at the same time, focus on what really needs to be completely secured and completely locked out, and allow until everything moves in absolute transparency and everything is working so fast it gets encoded throughout all the time, and it's completely secure and there's no access, whatever. Focus on what's really is stealable and makes sense to be hacked and stolen, and make everything below that, the work process, as fast and as seamless as possible. Avid bins are amazing. Hacker can steal a bin, it would mean absolutely nothing. I can show you the timeline of my latest show. Even if it's Star Wars, that means nothing. Maybe Star Wars would actually get some people excited, but
With a whoosh, right?
with a whoosh.
So as long as we have a creative on the panel, I mean, let me take that a little further and say, you know, as a creative, are the solutions out there ready for a creative environment? What are the holes? What are the things you'd like these guys to provide for you?
Seamless speed. So what I would love to have is somebody say, here, you can read your Gmail on the same computer that you edit your timeline and color your show on, and you are totally safe. You don't need to worry about it. While now what we do here is that I can't pull that plug from the back of my computer, but I'm turning off my internet completely, and I'm not turning it on, and I'm not going to the web, and I just work on this computer and on this shared storage, and that's it. I would love to have those limitations taken out and know that I'm still secure and safe for my work stuff.
Right, did you all hear that?
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
there's some good news in that, because we can do that today, and in our environment, we have the creatives who, and a lot of them are freelancers and who come in, and we have to be able to secure it. We have to be able to secure content sometimes on their machines. So, it's not unusual for us to have creatives out in Denver or, down in Florida or whatever else. So there's a set of best practices, there's a set of things you put in place. So you can have your creatives, using whatever tool they want, whatever they're best with. They're able to, work securely, and you can have it at the high performance levels that you want. The big thing is, and coming from the CIO side and the other side, is that we do get audited frequently, and those audit requirements are built into the client contract. And if we're caught in a breach, it means a lot of money. So the good news is you can do it. The good news is that you can do what you're asking for in kind of an agency and creative budget. The one thing you have to be able to do, though, is to use some of the tools and best practices out there and change to adopt them. But then you're able to do what you want.
Great.
Yeah, and also, I mentioned earlier about Avid Cloud's editorial and Avid's new interplay on the cloud as well. So by and when we've been looking at this, we don't sell the cloud's editorial and asset management, and there's companies like Bebop and Avid and other companies that are working on this stuff. The bandwidth is not there yet, but it's coming. But online editorial is very secure because your data is not anywhere around here. So you could be on your computer doing your email, doing whatever you want to do on that, and you can edit on that on Media Composer and applying and getting your asset management from an Interplay license, and be editing and do all that. And it's extremely secure. It's going to get more secure as Avid builds this thing. They just launched it late last year, and it's been out. So
Thank you so much, Jeff. We just have a couple minutes
Okay.
left, so I want to make sure that everybody has a chance to. Yes, there's a question here?
Just to offer that some people are using devices for measuring your fingerprint, your iris, and the sealed unit, and so it's only.
I'll start again because probably not everybody heard. Some people are starting to use secure systems where you have to have your thumb or your iris or both read it before you get access. It's a sealed unit. They can do everything, email and whatever, but it's another level of security, especially if they're remote. You give them the special box, and they're the only ones. And if there's a problem, the machine will let you know, the manager of the network. So.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much. That's a great way to end our little journey into the rise of the machines. Thank you so much for attending, and thank you for speaking.
And thank you, Deborah. That was a great panel. I want to thank everybody in the session.
Thank you, man.
So while we're getting started, why don't you bring up your 10